All right, welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show, and today is our monthly series called Closing Time with Chris Linsell from The Close. Now, this is a partnership between Keeping It Real and theclose.com. Let me tell you about The Close. Theclose.com is the kind of real estate website designed to give agents, teams, and brokerages actionable strategic insight from industry professionals. They cover real estate marketing, lead generation, technology, and team building strategies from the perspective of working agents and brokers who want to take their business to the next level. Please visit theclose.com. That's The Close, TheClose.com, and subscribe to their newsletter so you can get notified each time they publish an article. With us, as always, is Chris Linsell. He's a staff writer and real estate coach for The Close. Chris is The Close's resident expert on real estate topics ranging from marketing, lead gen, transactional best practices, and everything in between. He's a licensed agent in the state of Michigan. Chris has been part of hundreds of transactions, from modest rural starter homes to massive waterside compounds. And when he isn't writing or coaching, you'll find Chris fly fishing or performing on the stage of his community theater's local production. Now, Chris, welcome once again to Keeping It Real. We're excited to have you.
DJ, great to be back. Happy to be here. It's a big day. It's a big day. I don't know why, but it's just going to be a big one. Today is going to be a big one. Whenever you're listening to this, it's going to be a big one. I just have a feeling 2022, it's here.
I'm excited too, and we actually have some possible news about Chris and our show, but we'll tease that and hold that just for the next time. We have some big announcements coming around Chris, but for now, we want to talk about a topic that I believe agents have been hearing more about in recent years. Different states have different regulations around it. Some have license requirements. Apparently, others don't. So this is a mileage may vary based on where you're practicing real estate, but we wanted to talk about a very controversial topic, I would think, for most of our listeners, and probably a topic that gets a lot of negative response. And we want to discuss that and talk about, the ethics of this particular process, which is called wholesaling. So I am very excited because this is, and just to give you a little insight into not even my understanding of wholesaling, but as a real estate recruiter, I've been doing this 12 years, and I end up talking to a lot of agents who, once they get their license, are figuring out which firm they want to join, and they'll interview here, usually with other firms too. And I've been doing this 12 years, and only, I would say, in Illinois, I'm in Illinois, the last 2 years, all of a sudden, I started getting calls from people saying, do you allow wholesaling? Because Illinois did apparently change their requirements, where Chris and I actually just looked it up. If you do more than 2 wholesale transactions in a year, you do need a license. And in the state of Illinois, other states have different rules. But I'm getting a lot of these calls. So it's just kind of seemingly out of nowhere. So I'm very curious to talk about this with Chris, who's a journalist and also a practicing agent. So let's define, maybe to get started, we should just define what wholesaling is for just anyone who might not be familiar.
Yeah. So wholesaling in a nutshell is when somebody, a wholesaler, approaches a home seller. And that's usually the way it works. It's usually somebody soliciting a home owner, somebody who owns property, and saying to them, I'd like to purchase your home. And in order to do that, we need to get the home, have a contract for a particular price. And the wholesaler actually doesn't have a specific intention to execute this contract. Their goal is to get the home under contract at a certain price, and then they go take this contracted price and they turn around and they try to sell this contract, or in the business we call this assign. They try to assign the contract to another buyer who is willing to pay a higher price than the contracted price. So a good example of this is, let's say I am a wholesaler, DJ, you are a home owner. I would approach you and I would say, I would like to purchase your home for $90,000. And you agreed to this. You put the home under contract. We have it in writing. I'm going to purchase this home for $90,000. And then I take this contract and I turn around and I turn to, say, a network of investors. And I say, I have this contract on 123 Main Street for $90,000. I will sell it to you for $100,000. More likely than not, I wouldn't tell you exactly how much I have it under contract for, because what I want is for you to pay a higher price than what I paid for it. I would then, if I agreed to your offer of, or the investor's offer of, say, $100,000, then I would transfer my contractual obligations to the investor. The total price would be $100,000. $90,000 would be paid to the original seller because that was their agreed upon sale price, and then the remaining $10,000 would go to me as the wholesaler. So it's not a complicated process. This is what we hear of a lot in the internet space as arbitrage. When you find something cheap and then you sell it for more, this is a pretty straightforward arbitrage technique. But it gets a little sticky in the real estate space because we have licenses, we have regulation, we have a code of ethics, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not all of the above apply to the wholesaling game.
So a few quick questions about who gets access to what information. So just to recap, a wholesaler goes to a homeowner, hey, I'll buy your property for X. Or I'll put it under contract. I'll buy the option to purchase it, but I am saying I will purchase the contract for X, purchase the property. Then it goes under contract. So the homeowner no longer is going to look for additional offers. And then that wholesaler goes around to people they know who are investors or just anyone who wants to possibly buy this property. Now, does the current homeowner who's selling, do they know what the total end price of the wholesaler who finds another buyer, do they get to see, well, I sold it for 90 and this other person bought it for 150? Well, that would be a significant, but yeah, let's just say 150. Would the homeowner ever know that?
That's a great question. And guess what? Nobody knows. There is no regulation around this. There's no requirement for disclosure, at least not on a national level. There is no board or local association that says, here are the rules to wholesaling. It is kind of the Wild West, in the same way that if you bought a pair of sneakers at a garage sale for $10, you would feel pretty great if you bought the sneakers for $10 at a garage sale and then put them on eBay for $80. The person who sold them at the garage sale would probably feel pretty rotten about that.
And wholesaling contracts typically are not recorded on the MLS. I don't know of any exception to that, but that is another reason why that information is often private, because you wouldn't get to see the recorded sort of public or the record that other agents would be able to see, and then maybe the homeowner might see as well.
That's correct. And in fact, it would be strange if it was recorded on the MLS, because wholesaling is almost exclusively done by people without real estate licenses, without the tutelage of a managing broker, and without the regulation of a local association. It really is, in many respects, it is real estate, the business of real estate being conducted without the safeguards, without the data, and without the regulation of the industry that is so prevalent in what I call traditional real estate transactions. So yeah, you wouldn't see that on the MLS. You wouldn't see the wholesaled price. You wouldn't see the investor price. And unless you live in a disclosure state, this is a private sale that would never be accounted for on your MLS unless your MLS has some sort of retroactive, like tax record kind of reconciliation later on. But here's the other interesting thing. In the majority of states, Michigan is one of these states, when it comes to these private sales, it is not required that the township record the specific number that a private sale happens under. It is only required if that number is reached via a public sale through a licensed real estate professional. So not even going to the tax records would allow you to understand the value of this property as it changes hands. It really is kind of a different side. It is the other side to the coin of real estate transactions, is wholesaling.
So let's talk about the possible problems. Maybe we can just keep them in, any sort of category, whether it's ethical, legal. We'll just start discussing what might be more obvious as an issue and maybe less obvious. And I'd like to start with one that, in case you're not as familiar with wholesaling, not Chris, of course, is, but for our listeners, one of the tactics that is often used, although certainly we don't want to paint all wholesalers with the same brush, but a tactic that is often criticized, that is used enough to become something that people write and talk about, for a practice that is not well received, which is that a wholesaler oftentimes has no inclination, and in most cases would never have inclination, to actually purchase a property. What they're wanting to do, the way they get paid, is they're going to, as Chris said, sell that to an investor. So that's sort of the whole point of wholesaling, is not for the middleman, the wholesaler, to end up with the property. So what they oftentimes do is they will tell the homeowner that they are, in fact, going to purchase this property. That is the commitment they're making. And then there's a race against the clock for that wholesaler to find a buyer. So the one of the first criticisms is, there's some sort of false pretense here of that I am going to purchase this property, Mr. or Mrs. Seller. I don't know how often a wholesaler would disclose, I'm going to make a promise to purchase this, but I'm really not going to purchase this. I'm going to find somebody else to purchase it. And there's really no obligation, I think, on the wholesaler's end, a legal obligation, to tell the homeowner this at all.
Yeah, that's true. Though, let's make no mistake, in a traditional purchase contract, it is illegal to enter into a contract that you have no intent or ability to fulfill. This is legally is known as the fraud and the inducement. It is committing fraud to sign a contract that you have no intention or ability or resources to execute. So, and frankly, it kind of is a house of cards that starts to fall down pretty quickly if a wholesaler discloses to the seller that they have no intention of actually buying this. Because in doing so, a wholesaler would have to say, hey, listen, I'd like to get your home I'd like to have exclusive right to purchase your home for a certain dollar figure. And I know that dollar figure is under the market value of this home. So I'm going to go and try and find somebody who will buy it for market value. I am requiring a contract from you that says I'm going to buy this home for less than what it's worth. No home seller in their right mind would agree to that unless there are some extraordinary circumstances. And even if there were extraordinary circumstances, the home seller is not guaranteed a sale here. They're only guaranteed that the home wholesaler will have the exclusive right to look for an investor or look for somebody to assign this to. There is a real chink in the armor of wholesaling when you put it on the backdrop of the real estate practice, because in no way, shape, or form is any step of the real estate wholesaling process that I can ascertain anyway, one that offers a fiduciary responsibility to any of the parties. There is no responsibility to the seller to look out for their best interests or even their interests at all. There's no responsibility to the buyer. The only person that matters in this scenario is the wholesaler. And that is completely opposite of what our code of ethics binds us to.
Now, what happens if a wholesaler does not secure an investor with this sort of this contract that they've put in place with the current homeowner?
Well, there's a handful of things that could happen. They could say, I've changed my mind. I don't want to buy this. And the seller could say, well, hey, we have a contract. You are obligated to buy this. And the seller or the buyer could say, well, I don't have the money. And so you can try and sue me, but what are you going to sue me for? I don't have any cash. Right. And laws are typically written to protect buyers instead of sellers. So it's usually more of a pursuit that is going to be more trouble than it's worth. If a seller was to try and bring legal action, a buyer could, if they can't find somebody to assign their contract to, if they are smart, they are baking in escape clauses into their contracts that say, I have the right to void this contract for absolutely no reason other than I just don't want to be in it up to a certain date. These kind of escape clauses. The other thing that they could do, hypothetically, is they could bake into their contracts some sort of I will, at such and such a time, if you are a licensed real estate professional, at such and such a time, if I don't have somebody to assign this contract to, I will list the home for sale for the price that we've agreed upon. That does happen occasionally, but frankly, it is usually a scenario of the wholesaler just says, well, that didn't work out. I'm just going to walk away and move on to the next person that I'm going to try and put under contract. It just doesn't end well for many people, frankly.
Yeah. And I will say oftentimes another tactic that wholesalers will use in order to justify the process is if the homeowner says, well, why wouldn't I list it with a realtor? And the wholesaler might say, well, let me explain to you how realtor fees and commissions work. And if we, figure out what those typical commissions might be, if somebody were to sell this property, well, look, you're actually, going to be paying this X amount in fees and commissions. So here's a way to avoid fees and commissions. And I'm willing to buy it right now for essentially no fees or commissions. So yeah, if you had a realtor, they might be able to get you 100,000, but you're going to be paying possibly 10,000. And no, those numbers probably aren't accurate, but that's sometimes another tactic that's used to convince that seller or homeowner to sell the property to the wholesaler right then and there to avoid a lot of those commission issues.
Yeah, it's the truth. And frankly, it is kind of a smoke and mirrors sort of explanation, because it is really hard to justify a wholesaling angle as a benefit to a seller, because frankly, the only way that I think hypothetically this makes sense for a home seller is if the margin that a wholesaler would clear would be less than the typical cost of a real estate transaction. And that margin would then be likely somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 or 4%, maybe. And for most people that I know that have pursued or are active in the wholesaling space, 10 to 15% is kind of the only thing they get out of bed for, frankly. And so there just is there's no math that makes sense to me as to how this benefits anyone except for a single person in the middle of this transaction, who is essentially taking an exorbitant fee to play matchmaker between investor and property seller or property owner.
And so we might be thinking at this point, well, what kind of owner might be susceptible to this sort of sales pitch from a wholesaler? And I could think of a few examples. One could be possibly the heirs of maybe some parents that pass away, that leave a house to children or other family members who do not ever want to deal with that home again, just want to get rid of it. I imagine wholesalers probably try to find those types of situations and say, hey, I can get rid of this for you very simply and easily. You don't have to deal with anything. I'm just going to buy it for this. So that would be sort of, I think, a pretty obvious reason why that could happen. Another one would be the home is in a distressed state where it's going to require a tremendous amount of upkeep to get it to be able to sell effectively on the MLS, right? So that's another, or perhaps the loan is underwater or the homeowner can no longer pay the mortgage and there's a risk of defaulting on the loan. So distressed kind of situations, I would think would be more susceptible, where people are just looking to get out and maybe they grab the first lifeboat that comes their way. Do I have a good understanding of that?
I think that all those situations make sense, but not a single one of those scenarios in my brain is the optimal scenario. Right. Because if, like, let's say you've got the heirs, your parents just passed away, you've got their house, you need to unload it for emotional or financial or logistical reasons, you name it. In what way does somebody saying, I will conditionally buy your house, assuming that I can find somebody else to pay more for it than I'm offering you? Like, how does that simplify your life? I can't think of a single scenario where having somebody who might buy my house and puts me under contract and handcuffs me and does not allow me to do anything else with my house in the time that they're maybe going to buy it, but not really going to buy it. Like, they're just, to me, this feels like, I'm just gonna be honest with you, this feels like a grift to me. This does not feel like there's any upside measurable to the other outcomes that are possible within a real estate scenario that makes sense to people. Does it happen? Yeah, it happens every day. I'm sure it happens more than we have an understanding of because of the lack of regulation and recording. And could it be, I guess, hypothetically, an option for some people? Maybe. And there might be wholesalers out there who take a very different approach to this. There might be wholesalers out there that say, listen, I have a network of investors who are interested in homes that match the criteria of your home. I understand that you may have reasons why your home doesn't feel like a candidate for sale. Maybe it is in disrepair. Maybe you are financially in a place where you're concerned that the amount of money that you would get for the home wouldn't cover your loan, and it would put you in a spot where you have to bring money to the table at closing, and that's just not an option for you. There are a handful of reasons why a homeowner might want to sell and feel like they can't sell, and a wholesaler does have, if they're connected in the right ways, they could have value via these connections that could provide a home owner with the right kind of network to execute on their goals. That being said, because of the lack of regulation, you don't need a license. You don't need any training. You don't have to report. I mean, frankly, this is income that if you wouldn't, there's no form of reporting. There's no state regulatory agencies. This is somebody stroking you a check. Frankly, there's just so many ways that this goes sideways that you need a cadre of virtual angels who decide they want to become wholesalers to avoid the legal and ethical and just frankly immoral pitfalls that come with this scenario, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I think we've made the case that this is largely a predatory practice. Similar to, I always think of it more similar to the days before 2008 and 9, where the real estate market crashed significantly, where there were interest only loans, the early 2000s, where people did not have to put, it wasn't a grift per se, but it was a very vulnerable place to be if you went into an interest only loan that might adjust from 2% as your initial rate up to 7%, within a year or two's time. And those loans aren't even, I think they're still around. Maybe a better example is a reverse mortgage, which also is problematic for a lot of cases. But I think we agree that this is a dubious and predatory practice. And again, I'm sure there's people that would claim otherwise, but that's just our opinions of it. That being said, I will tell you, here in Chicago, I'm a recruiter, so I deal with people who are looking to move firms. They talk to usually many firms, including ours. By the time they get to me, I'm not the first person they've chatted with. And if they are wanting to go into wholesaling, at least here in Chicago, the response I get is, the very first question is, do you allow wholesaling? Do you allow your agents to wholesale? And our answer is no. And the reason for that is the reasons we just mentioned. And in addition, our errors and omissions coverage does not include wholesaling, or I believe it doesn't include, or it's like questionable about whether our insurance provider would cover an errors and omissions claim on a wholesaling transaction. And we're just worried about losing our license. So we don't allow it. And what people tell me is, I don't even know a firm. I'm sure there are that allow it, but none of the large franchise firms, to my knowledge, none of them allow it. And I've yet to find any firm here locally, even smaller firms that do allow it. Again, I'm sure there are some, but it's become very common that I get these calls, because I think what happens, at least here in Chicago, there's a lot of seminars and courses that people can take where they are told about this practice, and it is pitched in a way that is, I'm sure, persuasive, seductive, even possibly. But you have to really get your real estate license in Illinois to really be able to do wholesaling. Again, I guess you could do up to 2 transactions a year without it. But if you're really wanting to make money at this, you'd probably want to do more than that. So you have people that get their license and then they're just stuck going, well, nobody really wants me. And it's like, well, yeah, because you were sort of sold on this whole concept. And you new agent didn't even know that this is kind of a predatory practice. So it's just becoming really common. I think the people benefiting the most oftentimes are the people selling these courses, because it just exploded out of seemingly nowhere in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's the truth. And one thing that is really interesting to me, and something that I hope, if you are listening to this, maybe you saw the title of this podcast, and you don't have a real estate license, and you're thinking, well, I want to get into wholesaling, so maybe this will be helpful for me. If you are the sort of person who would be good at wholesaling, now these are the sorts of people who connect well with their community. They talk well to strangers. They are able to demonstrate value of their services via their a smart and thoughtful conversation, and can answer good questions. You would do great as a licensed realtor. This is what we do. And in fact, you get to do this with the benefit of also being able to go to bed at night with a clear conscience, knowing that you are getting paid on average a lot of money relative to the rest of the working world, and you're doing so with the best interests of your clients in mind. I mean, if you think that wholesaling is for you, real estate really, it really could work out great for you. The last thing I want to say about this, DJ, and I think this is important to say, is even though I think wholesaling is mendacious and frankly it's fraud in a lot of ways, it is a threat to an overregulated industry that is ready and needs change in order to account for the way that business is done in the 21st century and beyond. And though I think that this particular iteration of change and disruption is harmful on the whole to most players in the market, change does need to happen. Regulations need to adjust. They need to be loosened in some places, tightened in other places. We need to account for the way that business is done in the 21st century. And while I don't think this is the way to do it, this should be a high sign. This should be a lighthouse on the ocean here that says, hey, look, there are things happening over here and we need to adjust to them. We need to change our thinking a little bit as an industry to account for these different approaches. And is this the way to do it? Probably not. But I do think that our industry deserves some disruption and some regulatory change. If this isn't it, which I don't think it should be, we need to think about it in other terms and have those conversations.
Yeah, I'll just end with this as a something that again, I do consider myself a bit outside of the industry because that was not my background, was not real estate when I came on board here, and I don't practice real estate. And I have always been absolutely confused. This is a different topic for a different day, about real estate commissions and who actually pays them. And that's something that I feel is murky at best, possibly not intentionally secretive and sort of confusing, but just by nature of the laws and processes in place and the standards that we employ can be very difficult to understand for a homeowner who's either selling or the person buying. And I always find it interesting to ask agents, how do you explain commissions, to your, not what you get paid, but just what the overall commission is and who's actually paying those fees? And it's not a simple answer, I don't feel. And that's something where also, we're talking about regulation, and maybe we could spend a whole topic on how to have conversations about what real estate commissions are and who's responsible for paying them. Because that to me is also very confusing.
Totally. And there are so many different ways that we can improve our process just by educating both ourselves and our consumers and being supported by regulatory bodies and local commissions that facilitate that education rather than hinder it. So if we keep things like wholesaling on the fray, and frankly, if we overregulate in the wrong ways, it's going to drive people to the unregulated spaces. This is why black markets occur, frankly. So because we are providing overregulation that prevents the real flow of information, goods, services, and money. And people say like, well, shoot, I can do this better on my own. And I know how to do this. And there's no reason that I shouldn't do this. So I'm just going to look out for number one and just do it like this. And that's not the precedent we want to set as an industry.
Agreed. Well, a great place to wrap up. And just as we're wrapping up, want to remind everyone that if you're not already a current reader and subscriber to theclose.com, it is our absolute recommendation that you start reading their content. 99% of it is free right on their site, and it's good long form, deep dive articles into how to become a better realtor, essentially how to better improve your business, your skills. They go deep, and very few, in fact, I'm not sure of any real estate blogs or websites that have this kind of level of journalism where it's specifically designed to help agents kind of grow. And real quickly, can you just mention your subscription model that The Close has for anyone who wants to sort of see what else The Close offers in addition to all this great free content?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to come join, if you want to take your business to the next level and you go a little deeper on The Close, you can join The Close Pro. Close Pro is our premium service. It is the place where we keep all of our fantastic next level courses, our resource library, access to coaching, access to webinars that you can't get anywhere else. We've got a fantastic set of training courses on Facebook and on Instagram and on surviving and thriving in shifting markets and long-term lead generation strategies. It just goes on and on and on. We are looking at providing, frankly, the next level of service. If you like what we do on the close, come get a personalized level up approach by accessing the Close Pro. We offer this at $35 a month, $299 for the year. And there are a ton of things that get added to this service every single month. So come check out the Close Pro. And even if you're not interested in Close Pro, just come to the Close. We got all sorts of cool stuff going on, including like really great new content that's hitting the wire every day. Like just today we published, or yesterday we published, 7 real estate copywriting rules professional writers swear by. Realtors, you guys, we're writing listing descriptions and marketing and branding. Come learn from professionals. Come check out what we got. This is the sort of content we publish every single day.
We're big fans. Everyone should go to theclose.com and read their content, get hooked on it. It will help your business. And it's not the simple 5 tips to have a successful open house that are things like bake cookies and things you already know. Like I said, they go deep and wide, and because they know if the content isn't good, you're not going to show up again, and the content is good. So please go to theclose.com. Chris, as always, thank you so much for showing up and really going deep in a topic of wholesaling. And for anyone else who, if you have ideas of topics that you'd like Chris and I to discuss at length, like wholesaling, please let us know. But also, please tell a friend about our show. Think of one other real estate professional that would benefit from hearing this, or perhaps send this to homeowners as a way to educate them about wholesaling, people that you know. I also see this as a huge opportunity for our listeners who are agents who think, well, what do I do about this? Educate your customers, your sphere of influence. This is a great topic to create social media content about, make videos about, and really kind of a buyer beware scenario that you get to talk about with everyone you know. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you, Chris. On behalf of Chris and myself, we also thank the entire audience for continuing to listen and support our show. And we will see everybody next time. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, TJ.